This area. It's kind of remained a touchstone really in whatever I do. These are the light autobiographical works. So I originate from Yetholm in the Scottish borders, and I grew up as a boy there in the 50s. And in the 50s, basically not many people had televisions or anything like that in the village. So as a boy growing up, you got all of your fun, if you like, and experiences out in the landscape. And Yetholm was a great place to grow up because you could go north, south, east, west and feel, totally as free as the bird. So this piece relates to a particular poaching incident which I've never forgotten, and it was a kind of strange event. So we were dropped off. It was a particularly windy night. And we went into this wood, a larch wood, and it was very odd right from the beginning, and the wind didn't seem to penetrate the wood. So we got about halfway through the wood, and we eventually decided, whispering to each other, that the reason there were no pheasants in the wood, no other birds or no animals, was because the gamekeeper was probably, realising that his pheasants were being poached, and he'd been sitting in there all night. So we quietly left the wood, just by the side of it, over a fence and over a burn, and we were walking away. And my friend Erch, who is not so much a spade is a spade, but a spade is an effing shovel, suddenly grabbed me and said, look, and this is where this big eye, comes from in this sculpture. He saw this big eye and he described it like the eye of a Hereford bull, quite pinky colour, following us, across this field. I have to say that I didn't see that, but he was absolutely adamant it was there, and when he mentioned it to me, apparently it just dissolved and disappeared. But anyway, the wood that we were poaching was called the Graveyard Wood, so it had a bit of a ruined church with gravestones all higgledy-piggledy in the graveyard. And it was only afterwards when we began to reflect that the wood didn't have any wind in it, and it was just strange, because there were large trees, and the wind should have penetrated it really quite easily. So it was an experience, and it influenced 2 or 3 bits of sculpture at that time. Okay, see, this sculpture here is it's a poacher's dream. It's very much, I suppose, based on the idea of an Inuit mask, but it's about a kind of head with kind of waves of thought coming out from it, and it's a kind of autobiographical piece. It's again, me thinking, about that time that I spent up in Yetholm. This piece down here, made this in 1971, and this is a forged metal sculpture, and it's a piece called Head of the Ornithologist. So it's not so much about a head, but actually about a head thinking of things ornithological. So that this shape here is like the kind of curve of a hill. This tree-like form doubles up as an eye, and you've got this kind of bird form there as well. This piece, as well as the others, is very typical of something I was interested in formally at this point. In fact, I'm still very interested in it, and that's that kind of idea of the juxtaposition of enclosed negative space and plane and line, and even in my most recent carvings, I'm very interested in that idea of how space is charged either within, or around a piece of sculpture. This is very much about figurative imagery, but it's actually about a kind of primitive figuration which intrigued me more than something that's illustrative. And I think this was initially influenced by looking at carving on a gravestone at Dryborough Abbey. I did a whole series of these beaten masks around that time, and this is just an example of one of them. In 1982-84, I got really interested in that lineage of objet trouvé heads, these kind of found object pieces, and I'd been looking at the Spaniard Gargalo, and then Gonzalez, and then of course Gonzalez influenced Picasso, and Picasso began to use quite a number of kind of found objects in his sculptures. This is an example of one of these pieces. This piece is, I call this kissing head, and I made about 10 of these sculptures at that particular time. Some elements are made, others were kind of found objects, but I was really quite interested in the kind of three-dimensionality of the object and pieces like this. I think it was maybe around about 1980, the Scottish Sculpture Trust were involved in raising funds to create a memorial for Hugh MacDiarmid. MacDiarmid was somebody who lived in the southwest Scottish borders. He came from Langham, and I began to read his poetry and his prose and his political discourse, and I suddenly realised this was a person in Langham who had grown up pretty much the same way as I did in the southeast borders, and it was fascinating to me, to kind of read that poetry, prose and political discourse and see who he'd used that kind of formative experience in Langham to underpin a lot of his work. So it kind of gave me confidence, really, that I do something similar with my own work. This memorial is basically an open book, and the actual monument, which sits on the White Hill Yet at Langham, is it's about 16 feet across by 12 feet high. So the whole idea of it is you look at the sculpture, but you also actually look through it at the landscape, beyond it. And each of these little cameos, can relate to, sort of particular poems, or, this piece up here that, kind of flying eagle form, and the saltire actually relates to MacDermot's indomitable, kind of power, as at that time a Scottish nationalist. So all of these, can relate to particular aspects, taken from his poems. And the sculpture is made in Corten steel and bronze. And after made, it took me about 2 years to make this piece, and it was finally erected in 1984. So, after I finished that sculpture, and I think this was almost coming to the end of these images pieces, and it was shortly after that my work took a completely different direction. I made a significant shift actually away from metal images pieces towards more non-figurative sculptures in stone. And I think that had to do with the fact that I had seen that Symbols of Power exhibition in the National Museum of Antiquities, but also a kind of desire really to get more volume into the work, the kind of sense of kind of sculptural identity. So there needed to be a significant shift away from that. What I do is I work in the sketchbook first of all, and then kind of try something out in 3 dimensions. Invariably, it's working with either clay or plaster. So this is just an example, really, of a number of maquettes in plaster. So I'm experimenting in 3 dimensions. I think I carved this in 2009, and it was part of the kind of stone project, and I did a big research job when I was still at Edinburgh College of Art. And then during the Edinburgh Festival, I organised a milestone carving event where we had 10 stone sculptors from around the world, basically making a sculpture within a month, within the environment of Edinburgh College of Art. And this piece that I've made here, it's all carved from one piece of stone, and the material is Kilkenny limestone. And the way that I've carved it, I've actually used a kind of chopping technique, with a flat chisel. And the reason I've done that is to create, in different light conditions, it actually picks up, different tones, different characters.
well, the original title for it was Equilibrium of Opposites. It's about opposites in as much as you've got this kind of verticality, you've got this kind of horizontal form, you've got lines in relation to planes, and you've got negative space as well. So it's male and it's female. It's about things that are kind of secure and the vertical looks almost as if it's growing out of space, so it's very solid. This horizontal piece has got a feeling of potential movement. So you get something that's static and something which is moving.
So this bit of sculpture on here, it's a bit of basalt, and the idea of it originally came from seeing a click mill up in Shetland, and a click mill is one of these very small kind of mill buildings that sit astride a burn, and there were one or two millstones outside it, and they'd been sitting there so long they were beginning to sink back into the earth, and it actually reminded me of this whole concept of the circularity of the world. Now, what I mean by that is this kind of idea that mountains are built up and then they're eroded away by sort of temperature, wind, water, and ice action, and then all of this eroded material eventually is carried with rivers or whatever, and it's piled up again and reconsolidated into rock. So there is a continual kind of circular system going on in the world. This piece is called Table of Maquettes, and I made the table and then made all of these pieces upon it on the two levels. So I think of each one of these maquettes as potentially being as big as the table itself, or even bigger. So this is using a variety of different stone. There's some marble there, there's some limestone, granites, basalt, gabbro, I think a piece of porphyry. These pieces here, they're related now to an interest in geology. So they're kind of related to landscape, but a kind of landscape which is non-pictorial. It's about under the surface of landscape, not anything to do with the surface. These are street sets which I've cut in half, and I then actually work into them. But what's important about them for me is that I've come to know over many years of working with stone that stone's got the capacity to hold memory, to hold trace, to hold emotion as well. And this overall form, the shaping of it has been made by a mason hundreds of years ago when he made that casé or set, to go into the street. And then when it's been used in the street, countless numbers of people who've walked over it, or animals or traffic, give it another kind of shaping on this topmost edge. And so in other words, there is a kind of trace of the original maker, there's a trace of the function it was used for, and then I do my thing on it as well. So there are various levels of trace and memory that for me are quite important.
This sculpture here has got a natural proper vein running through it, and then sort of carved and coloured this other much more kind of severe line next to it. I guess I'm really fascinated by the fact that this copper intrusion in this bit of basalt could be hundreds of millions, possibly billions of years old, and this is very recent because I've made it, and that kind of sense of kind of deep time and relation to something is quite recent is of interest. The Tourist project was really interesting. I got involved in that in 2000. It was a millennium project, and the whole concept was hatched by Brian Milne, who was then chairman of Tyree Art Enterprises, and Bob Steedman, the architect. And their idea was that the architects, Sutherland and Hussey, would be the people who would design the building, and I would be lead artists and a group of artists who would put artworks into this building. Right at the outset, when I met with Sutherland and Hussey, I said to them, well, a much more interesting thing to do would be a piece of experiential architecture. So in other words, the art and the architecture would be combined. And we advertised for other artists, and Sandra Kennedy from up in the northwest was appointed, as was Donald Urquhart and Glen from Edinburgh. So we went out to Tyree and we spent a week there taking a lot of photographs and so, and we eventually developed this idea of this experiential artwork, and basically it's a 50-metre long piece of art with a coloured concrete floor in the first section and 8 feet high walls that are painted white, so you can't see over the top of them. So what it means really is that all the time, all you're seeing above you is the kind of strip of the sky. So it's, I mean, that's amazing in itself. The fact that you're just totally focusing on the sky as you walk along. And then at a certain point you go into a wooden structure, which is it feels much more protective and warm, and it has a different kind of character. And right at the very end of the piece there is a glass box, which has a slate floor. And when I say a slate floor, I mean slates that are actually inserted on their edge, on the floor, so that they, pick up, if you like, the kind of texture of the sea or the movement of the sea beyond that. And on the top of the glass box structure, which has a galvanised metal frame surrounding it, there are kind of holes in this galvanised metal frame
so that when it rains quite heavily, it actually allows water, to kind of flow over the kind of surface, almost like a fishmonger's window. So the piece is, it's to do with the weather, it's to do with the light, it's to do with this kind of view out over the sea. And there wasn't an awful lot of money available, to do the work. So basically it meant both the architects and the artists rolling up their sleeves and, basically with picks and shovels and rakes, kind of forming the ground. I did the slate floor, and every aspect of it we were fully in control with. So it was like making one huge artwork, but in a very hands-on way. And it's been incredibly successful. Yeah, I did the big sculpture down in Kelso, and it's called the Kelsey Stain, and it was related to these street sets. I think most of the locals call them cobbles, but they're not actually cobbles. They're sets. But to use the local name cobble, I was intrigued. It's a very beautiful square, Kelso Square, and the fact that each of these street cobbles has developed a patina or a particular shape by being used over hundreds of years was a good enough reason for me to use it as a kind of concept for this big piece of work. The Kelso stone is it's a basalt, and it was quarried in India near a place called Mamallapuram. The Kelso stone in its finished state is 19 tons. I got the stone in India partly because I knew I could get the specialist technical help, to carve it in the way that I wanted to carve it, because basalt sets are essentially napped, and the way the material breaks, it comes off in rhythmical scallops. And I wanted to try and replicate that on the Kelsey stain. So, to be able to find people who could still do that, I had to go to India, to find them. And these people had the skills of carving basalt going back to about the 15th century. A stone of that size would have been impossible to get in the UK or, in fact, Northern Europe. So I spent 2 months out there carving it. So the way that I did this is that I put an Ordnance Survey map right in the centre of it, and then actually drew lines through all the kind of place names, took a tracing of that, and then took it to the centre of the stone, extended those lines to the edges of it, and then subdivided this vertical face into 10 equal portions. So each portion represents a kilometre distance from Kelso, and by so doing I could plot pretty accurately where each place name should be. And this is very much a collaborative piece of work, in that I asked inhabitants from each of these places, whether a town, a farm or a village, to appoint someone to write the place name. So basically the stone has got 220 different forms of writing, all with these different people. And that was quite interesting, actually, because what you found was that it's quite egalitarian, the piece, in that the former Duke of Roxburgh wrote floors on the stone, but there was a 102-year-old lady wrote in the farm, and there were primary school children who were just beginning to write. So as I said, it's egalitarian, and it actually covers, the whole of society. What I've come to realise is that, the language of forms that I experienced here as a boy have remained with me all of my life. No matter, how I try to prevent myself from using these forms, they keep coming back. And I think that formative visual and kind of physical bodily experience of walking through this landscape has continued to be part of me and part of my language in making art.